The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 1, Listening and Speaking. It addresses the assessment standard, which requires learners to demonstrate knowledge of different forms of oral communication for social purposes.
Hello everyone. Our lesson today is about talking to people, the kind of social communication we do every day. We will of course be drawing on our knowledge and skills from the first two lessons in this series, where we learnt about the 4 elements of oral communication, which include register, audience, purpose, and context. These elements are crucial to our understanding of oral communication. Today we are going to focus on the language and the attitudes we employ to make everyday social interaction work. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to recognize appropriate social language and employ appropriate social language. Let's start by looking at some social language which you are probably very familiar with.
What's up, dude?
Cool, man. Where you headed?
Out of here, gotta work.
Now you'll remember that we spoke about register in the first lesson of this series, and this dialogue is the first example of outright slang which we've had so far. But this register is appropriate to the situation. 2 friends of more or less the same age and the same social group are greeting each other in language they understand. Now they might understand what they're talking about, but I would not greet my friends in the same way. And that is the first important point of today's lesson. In all social situations, language must be appropriate to the situation. Now let's do a practical example together to understand how language should be appropriate to the situation. I want you to take a look at the following 2 pictures and see if the dialogue is appropriate to what is happening. How's it, doll? Looking fabulous. Thanks, babe. Just came from the gym.
Good morning. It's a lovely day, isn't it? It is, and how are you?
Now it seems to me that the speech bubbles have been mixed up here. The dialogue of the first picture with the priest actually belongs to the second picture, and the dialogue with the second picture would be more appropriate to the first picture with the priest. So now that we've sorted out those dialogues, let's correct them quickly.
Good morning. It's a lovely day, isn't it? It is, and how are you?
How's it, doll? Looking fabulous. Thanks, babe. Just came from the gym. Now that definitely makes a lot more sense. You might be wondering how we knew that the dialogues were not appropriate for their accompanying pictures. We'll take a look at the following definition, and I'm sure it will all make sense to you. Colloquial language is everyday informal language, usually specific to a particular group. It's very easy to identify the differences between standard English and colloquial English. To illustrate this, let's compare an example of standard English to colloquial English. A South African colloquial greeting would go something like this. How's it? How's it going? But a fairly standard English greeting would look like this. Good morning. Are you well? Now let's get back to our original comparison of the 2 pictures. Based on their dialogue, we can assume that the 2 women meeting in a shopping mall are far more likely to be speaking colloquially than the religious leader and the man talking to him. Now I'm sure you understand that the register must be appropriate to the situation, but it must also be appropriate to the audience. The man's audience is someone whom he respects, and so his language is quite formal and certainly standard, clear English. This means that in your interaction with people, you need to be aware of two things which we discussed in Lesson 2, namely audience and appropriate register. You also need to be aware of the purpose of your interaction. Remember, purpose can be defined as why the text is written. Now, because these lessons are on oral communication, we will obviously change this definition to say why the text is spoken. Look at the short text of spoken language and see if you can find out what its purpose is. My word, what an excellent project! Very well done, Sissy. I'm sure that you are all familiar with this kind of praise for your assignments, right? But what is the purpose of this kind of statement? Firstly, it is a compliment. Secondly, its purpose is to positively reinforce the work that Sissy has done, to encourage her to carry on doing good work. And thirdly, it is praise for a job well done. So you can see that everything we say has a purpose. Now I'm going to give you two more examples. Let's see if you can figure out what the purpose of each of the speakers is. Go to the shop immediately and get some bread for lunch. And what did she say when you told her? Now these examples illustrate just some of the purposes we have when we're talking to people. One of the purposes of speech is to introduce ourselves to new people, often to a large group, such as a new class or in a meeting perhaps. Often this can be quite awkward and embarrassing. But if you think about it logically, it's quite an easy social interaction. Take a look at this.
My name is Tata Khatebe. I live in Twilight Children. I'm attending school in Unation Verdedorp.
So far in this lesson, we've looked at 3 of the 4 elements of oral communication. We've examined register, audience, and purpose. So the final element we need to look at today is context. Remember in Lesson 2, we defined context as the background information connected to a piece of writing. But because we're focusing on speaking, context can be redefined as the background information connected to a spoken text. So, the situation you are in would determine the kind of introduction you would make. For example, if you were in a business meeting, your introduction would be something like this. My name is Cyril Mampuru, and I work as an accountant for the Worthwhile Bank. As you can see from that example, a business introduction requires a full name, a job description, and a place of employment. Now we're going to look at an example of spoken language from a book written by Rudyard Kipling, a famous English writer. "The curse of our country," said Wali Dad. "They talk. It is like the Athenians, always telling some new thing. Ask Lalun, and she will show you how much she knows of the news of the city and the province." Our immediate thoughts should be about the register of this piece. The language that Wali Dad, the character, uses is formal and quite impressive. He is an educated and thoughtful man. What do you understand about the context of the words spoken here? Although we have words like our country, the city, the province, we don't really have very many clues about the context of these words. We do, however, have a name, Wali Dad, and this name gives us some idea of the context. The name Wali Dad is an Indian Muslim name, so perhaps he is speaking from some city in India. Also, look at the formality of his language. It is very formal, so we can assume that it was spoken some time ago, perhaps in the early 20th century. Let's look at the audience of this piece. Wali Dad is speaking to the narrator, who is an acquaintance of his. Finally, let's look at the purpose of the spoken text. The speaker is describing his countrymen, and their love of talking. And then he gives his audience some advice. He tells the narrator to ask Lalun, because she knows about the city and the province. So the purpose of this piece then is to give the narrator some direction on who to ask to get the information he requires. So, by now you should be aware of how we vary our spoken language according to the situation we're in. I hope that you will use this knowledge for your own social interactions. Join me for the next 2 lessons where we will be focusing on conversation. Till we meet again, goodbye.
Yeah.